Let's welcome up, once again, Mr. Brian Tریسی. The very last session, this is it right here. Pay attention, take notes. All right, here's the man with the second best Caesar salad dressing in the entire world right here. Okay. All right.
Yes, that's true.
He'll say that while he's here on this stage, but yeah.
Yes, sure it is.
Did you get that? Okay, let's just repeat that over and over and over, you know. That's not called pity, is it? I heard you use that word earlier.
It's encouragement. I mean, you must never quit.
You must never quit. I love it. Okay, so we're going to have fun tonight with a little Q&A later on, but for now, last session with Mr. Brian Tریسی.
Hey, thank you. Well, you guys are great learners, tremendous absorbers of knowledge. And these last two sessions, I love this program, and I've had countless people come to me and tell me just wonderful stories about how one idea, one change, one transformation has changed their whole lives and their whole business, and they never thought of it before. It's sort of like, I think about the story of the 6 blind men and the elephant, which you've heard about. And the 6 blind men are trying to describe the elephant to each other. And one of the blind men feels the tusks of the elephant, and they said it's really hard and sharp. And the other one feels the ears, and he says, well, it's like a great carpet being aired out in the air with lots of wind. And the other one feels the side of the elephant and said, well, it's like a wall. And the other one feels the trunk of the elephant, and he says, well, it's very much like a tree trunk. And the other one feels the tail, and he says, well, it's like a rope. And the interesting point is they're all correct. But the answers are completely different depending upon your perspective. So it's a very famous story. Perspective is everything. You could always be right, but you could be wrong as well. So let's look at the session 5. Aha. We're going to go very quickly through this. Okay, session 5, we say your ability to sell your product or service and to get payment is the key to your business future. This is everything. It all comes down to sales. And the number one reason for business success is high sales. The number one reason for business failure is low sales. And all else is commentary. And so you never take your eye off the ball. It's very much like driving a car down a slippery, winding mountain road with a cliff on one side. Just never take your eye off the cliff. Never take your eye off the sales, because companies that have actually been in business for 100 years just go under in a few weeks because their cash flow stops. It's almost like they strangle. So we say nothing happens until a sale takes place. And so the first thing you ask is, what do we sell? Who do we sell it to? How do we sell it? What's the process? Why I like looking at business model reinvention so much is business model reinvention helps you to find different ways to sell an existing product, and in some cases a product that doesn't sell anymore in the old way. Number 4, your primary job, as I said before, is to create and keep a customer. That's the purpose of a business. A profit is the result of creating and keeping a customer in a cost-effective way. So we say, number 1, a great sales process consistently converts prospects into customers. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. If you can consistently convert them into customers, then you can have a wonderful business. And the IBM, which I mentioned, had 82% of the world computer market in 1983. And the government sued them because they were so successful. They said it must be antitrust. They must be doing something that is hurting their competitors. And after 13 years of lawsuits, they finally came back. Actually, Reagan was in office, and Reagan said, either bring a suit or drop it, because you've not been able to find one piece of information that indicates that they are doing anything wrong. And they dropped it after 13 years of pursuing them, and their only crime was offering such good products and services at such good prices that everybody wanted to buy from them rather than their competitors. They finally had to admit that they were suing them, or they were pursuing them, because they were satisfying more customers, making them happier. And then some years later, Microsoft got into the crosshairs of the trust department, and they tried to bring charges against them for 10 years. And finally, after 10 years, they were told, Fisher cut bait. If you cannot find customers, you see, you have to find unhappy customers. And you have to charge, in this case Microsoft, with the charge that they had somehow deprived or defrauded their customers by hurting them in some way. And all they could find was that Microsoft kept offering more and more product at a lower and lower price with a higher range of possibilities.
How dare they?
How dare they, yeah. That's the kind of people we've had in Washington for a while. You know, I won't go into it. Don't get me sidetracked. We'll spend a lot of time. But I will say this in a very simple term, and I've written it and worked on this for almost 50 years, is the primary job of government should be to create an environment where business is free to prosper. That's the job. Get the barriers out of the way, get the obstacles out of the way, make it possible for you and I to be able to start and build a profitable business. Everything should be based on business profitability, because that's where the trickle-down goes. This is where we enrich all the families and all the children and all the homes and build all the hospitals and all the schools, is through helping businesses to be successful. Without that, nothing happens. Anyway, you all know that. So number one, a good sales process consistently converts prospects into customers. Number two, it creates a great buying experience. People like it. It makes them happy. They walk out smiling, arm in arm, because it was a good buying experience. By the way, I think the best people in the whole world are the Disney Corporation. Boy, did they create a great buying experience. I mean, you want to go back before you've gotten in the front door. You want to go back out and go back in again because the buying experience is so good. It sets the stage for resales. It sets it up so that people, while they are concluding the first sale, they're already thinking of coming back again. A simple example, two people going to a restaurant, they take such good care of them that they're already thinking about bringing back their friends and bringing them back so they can have the same buying experience. Very, very important. Number four, and then a good question is that what you are achieving in your buying experience with your customers? And if so, if not, why not? And if not, what can you do to make it a great experience? So we say it sets the stage for resales, and then it generates recommendations and referrals. It makes people want to tell their friends to come and buy it. And as I mentioned, there's two sides of the sale. There's the first part, which is getting the sale, and the second part, which is keeping the sale. And more, the big successful companies like Apple are focusing on the sale, but after that they are putting in twice as much effort to make customers happy that bought the first time, so that they buy again and again. And of course, Apple is an example of that. Imagine 90% of their existing customers plan to buy again, and again, and again. And that's why they have more money sitting in bank accounts than half the Fortune 500 companies. Unbelievable, because they take such good care of their customers. So 7 steps in the selling process. The 7 steps are the process that I began to teach back in my 20s, and over the years, I've refined it, and now I've taught more than 2 million people this process. And according to Nightingale Conant, which used to distribute my audio programs, more people have become millionaires with this process than any other single process in the world of selling. And so when a person starts selling, the very first thing we teach them is these 7 steps. And these 7 steps are fundamental, like ingredients in a Caesar salad recipe. If you miss one of these ingredients, you can actually kill the sale and all hopes for resales. So number 1 is prospecting. There you go. Prospecting means finding people who want your product, who need your product, who have a problem your product will solve, and who will buy your product in a reasonable period of time. So you don't waste any time spending time and money with people who cannot buy or will not buy. No matter how much they like the product, they don't have the money. So the prospecting phase is almost like the kickoff in a football game. The second part is establishing rapport and trust. This is, I think, my unique contribution to the sales process, is that this really, in my work, is the essence. The very best sales work, millions and millions of dollars of research and interviews missed this. They talked about proper qualifying, they talked about properly understanding the needs of the client and so on. They didn't talk about this. This is really the heart of the sale, we call it. It's the heartbeat, is that the customer really likes and trusts you as an individual or organization. Number 3 And these are very extensive subjects. All right. Number 3, identifying needs accurately. And this is what the $20 million of research and 10,000 interviews discovered, is that this is where the customer starts to become interested in buying, is when the customer really feels that you understand what he or she wants and needs and will help them to get it. At this point, suddenly they'll just light up like a Christmas tree. Now they're really interested in talking to you about buying. And their price sensitivity declines as well. Number 4 is presenting persuasively, showing the customer that it's very much in their best interest to buy. And this is the very best choice for them, all things considered. And number 5 is answering objections, is what are the questions that people ask? And what we found in the very best research is the number 1 reason that people object, 2 reasons. Number 1 is fuzzy understanding. They don't really understand why they should buy this, why they would be better off than doing nothing or than buying a competitor's product. And the other thing is to reduce risk. Risk reduction is almost an obsession of customers. And the bigger the sale, the bigger the amount of money involved, the more the customer is concerned about risking, getting the wrong product, and paying too much for it and getting something that doesn't work. And then number 6 is closing the sale. Consistently, being able to ask for the order without paralyzing, like a deer in the headlights. And as I mentioned earlier today, when I learned how to sell, and then I not only practiced it, but created programs on it, transformed my sales career. And then I began to build sales organizations by recruiting and training people in multiple countries, and turned them from being just stumbling into top salespeople and very highly paid. I still meet them. I was in my 20s and 30s. I still meet them today, and they're millionaires. They live in big houses. Some of them own big businesses, selling the product that they were selling when they were at the bottom of the deck when I met them the first time. And they live in beautiful homes, and they live on the water in Florida, and they live in the mountains in Colorado, and so on. And number 7 is getting resales and referrals, which is more and more important, because at a certain point you drain the well. There just aren't any more new customers. So you really have to hold on to, as we've spoken before, to the customers that you have. So I want you to give yourself a grade over here. This is really important. I want you to give yourself a grade on each of these 7 scores. 6, there we go. And on a grade of 1 to 10. And I've done all kinds of tests and surveys on this, which directs you where you want to train people. So give yourself a grade of 1 to 10 to determine how well you're doing in each area. Prospecting. I develop a steady stream of qualified prospects, so I always have more people to see than I have time. Give yourself a grade of 1 to 10. Number 2, building rapport and trust. I quickly and easily build excellent relationships with my prospects. Give yourself a grade of how well you do that. This is so important. Number 3, need and problem identification. I ask excellent questions that enable me to identify the true needs of my prospects. When you're talking to people and asking them questions about their true needs, they listen to every word, and they like and trust you more and are ready to open up to you. Give yourself a grade of 1 to 10. Number 4 is presentation skills. I present my product or service clearly so that my prospect quickly realizes that what I sell is the ideal product or service for him or her. And this is really important. Many people, even though they want it and they need it and they can use it and they can afford it, they need to be persuaded that yours is the very best choice, all things considered. Number 5, answering objections. I have well-developed answers and responses for most customer objections. I remember many years ago, an insurance salesman, who was a friend of mine, sold me an insurance policy for $1 million, term policy. And that was a lot of money back in those days. And I asked him every objection I could think of to not buy it. And he answered every objection, just like slapping flies. He'd heard these so many times. He answered them beautifully. And he finally closed me with telling me about a person who was in my situation, married, 2 children, and had no insurance and died, and my wife had to go back to work and sell the house, and the kids had to go to public school, and they had no money, and so on. And he showed me the last will and testament and the actual settlement of this person. And I was so impressed by it, that was all it took. I bought the policy. Some years, about 2 or 3 years later, I was talking to an insurance agent in Florida, and he said everybody should have term insurance. And I said, well, you know. He said, let me show you this example. And so he gave me the example. He showed me the exact same forms that my friend in Edmonton had shown me. The same person, same age, same death, same everything. And I'd never seen, and it turned out that half the insurance agents in America were using this same proof that you should buy a policy right now. It was really quite amazing, and it was correct. But that proof generated at least $1 billion in life insurance sales because it was so persuasive. So sometimes one really good argument can be so persuasive, it can double and triple your sales. It can make you one of the best paid people in the field. And finally, getting resales and referrals. Number 7, I get a steady stream of repeat sales and referrals from my customers. And if you don't, why not? And this is a whole other subject. I have a 1- and 2-day seminar that I give all over the world on sales and referrals and retention. And what I found is there's 93 proven sales referral systems in the world today in the English language. How many does the average salesperson use? 0. They don't use any. Is if they get a referral, it's by gosh and by golly, it's an accident, it's a freak, it's something you don't know what to do with, like a hot coal, they bounce it from hand to hand. Whereas the real professionals have very carefully developed, practiced referral systems that cause referrals to just pour into their hands over and over again. That will be our next thing we do. And next one is become a great business person. Become a great business person. And this is becoming a manager or an executive as opposed to being a leader. You know, a manager is a person who gets things done through others. A manager is the quarterback that runs the team. So we say your level of skill and experience is the key factor in business success. It's interesting when Apple got into all kinds of trouble back in the 80s, they brought in what they call a gray hair. And a gray hair is a senior manager with gray hair who is very familiar with all the subtleties and nuances of building a business quickly. And of course, Steve Jobs and John Scully got into all kinds of fights. And finally, John Scully sat down with the board and said, see, he's too young, he's immature, he's impetuous, he's loud-mouthed, and so on. Sort of like somebody in Washington right now. God bless his little pointed head. So Scully got the board to fire Jobs. And Jobs was fired. He went out on his own. And he had about 10 years in the wilderness. Now, it wasn't all in the wilderness because he built 2 successful companies, but he went bankrupt with another and blah, 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 blah. And they finally brought him back in. And now he had gray hair. Now he had been blooded with all the mistakes that you could make in a company. And he came back and he told the board, either bring me back in or I won't have any more to do with the company. So they rehired him. And he turned the company around. And that story is quite a phenomenal story. You know what the first thing he did? Just exactly what we talked about earlier. He zero-based the whole business. He said, we're going to do zero-based thinking on every product, every service, every facility in this company. And they did, and they walked through the whole thing. They had 104 products that they were manufacturing, marketing, selling all over the world. And by the time Jobs had taken them through this very, very painful process, they were down to 4. I said, now we can build the company. Now we will get our control, our revenues and our costs and profits under control. Then we'll have excess fees. Now we can build the company and turn the company around. It's one of the most historical, phenomenal things ever happened. And he'll be remembered for lots of things, even though he was a jerk as well. Everybody agrees with that. He was a jerk. And actually, he killed himself. It was suicide by vegetarian diet. You know that story, don't you? It's really interesting. Is he came back in and he had pancreatic cancer and he had been cured by some of the best medical treatment in the world, and it came back, which it often does. I have a good friend whose husband had cancer 4 times. And it came back each time, and they had to go through dramatic work to cure it. In this case, he said, no, I'm not going to do the same thing I did before, chemotherapy and surgery and everything else, is I'm going to go to India and I'm going to go on to Ayurvedic medicine, which is sort of vegetarian diet. And so he did. And he got weaker and weaker, and they kept telling him, the vegans kept telling him that though anytime it'll turn, and you'll be back, and everything will be fine, and everything else. And of course, they believe each other. And so they believed each other, and he died, which was a terrible tragedy. So then they brought in Kutcher, Ashton Kutcher, to play the role of Stephen Jobs in the movie. I think it was Steve. There were two of them. One was called Jobs, one was called Steve. I don't know how they worked that out. But they made two movies, and he decided he really wanted to get into the Steve Jobs role. He was going to be it fully. So he was going to do everything, lead exactly the lifestyle, including eat all the foods that Steve Jobs ate in the last months of his life. 3 days after he started taking the Steve Jobs diet, they had to rush him to the ambulance, emergency ambulance, to save his life. He almost died. The actor almost died because the diet was so terrible for his system. And they just barely saved his life by getting him off to the hospital. And now he said, now he realized, this is why Steve Jobs didn't make it. The diet was terrible. So, your outer life and your business is a reflection of your inner life, like a mirror. This is one of the great laws of the universe called the law of correspondence. Your outer world corresponds to your inner world perfectly. So if you change anything in your inner world, your outer world changes as well. And so your life only gets better when you get better. And this is the most wonderful thing about building a business, is the better you get at business skills, the better your company becomes. And the better your company becomes, the better you become. So it almost goes back and forth, and you get onto an upward spiral. This is why you find, by the way, that virtually all top business people invest an enormous amount of time in continuous learning, like 1 or 2 hours a day. They read the best books. They go to conferences. They go to workshops and spend hours with other top executives. They keep learning new things. And as they learn these new things, they get ideas and insights that make them aware of problems and difficulties and solutions. And that's what we're doing for you. And they become great business people. The more they work on themselves, the more their outer world becomes better. So here are the qualities of top business people. Number one, intense burning desire for success. According to Harvard, the number one factor for success in business is ambition, is hungry. As our friend Les Brown says, you got to be hungry if you want to be successful in business. And they really, really want it. They're really hungry for it. The worst executive you can get is a member of the family, a family friend, someone that you bring in and put in charge, and they've never had to work for it. They've never had to suffer. So, number two is they love the product or service that they sell. One of my favorite studies every year is the Inc. 500 study. Inc. keeps 5,000 of the fastest growing companies in America on their database. And every year they give a prize to the top 500 of the top 5,000. And the statistics about these people are phenomenal. The company that won last year grew 18,800% in 1 year, in 3 years. And some of the companies were 3 years old, and they had grown 18,000 times, 18,000%. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. And so what they do is they interview the founders of these companies, and they interview the staff, and they interview the customers, and they interview everybody involved, almost like the stars. They interview everything in the orbit of the company, and they come up with some very interesting conclusions. One conclusion from the study last year is that business owners, the people who started these businesses, love the product or service. They started the product because they started the company because they loved the product and they couldn't get it anywhere else. They imported it, they built it, they exported it, they improved it, but something else. They loved the product. The second and third generation, for them it was a job. But for the first generation, they just loved this product. One of the things I recommend, by the way, is never buy a product or service or never run a company if you don't love the product. You don't love the company. If you just would almost do it for free. Now, number three is they really care about helping their customers. They start off actually wanting to help their family, and then they want to help their customers by what this product will do for them, will do to change their lives, to improve their lives, to bring them benefits and so on. Number four is they're in business for the long term, is they expect to be in business for the rest of their life. What do you want to be doing 10 or 20 years from now is one of the great questions that you can ask people. And the founders of the Inc. 500 companies plan to be doing this, running this company in that time. Just like Warren Buffett, just like you've never heard Warren Buffett talk about retiring. You've never heard Bill Gates talk about retiring. You never hear Sergey Brin and founders of Google talk about retiring. They just want to do it and do it and do it because they love it so much. So that's a really good term, by the way. Really good question. Number 5 is they're highly disciplined and focused. They have developed the ability to focus single-mindedly on one thing at a time and not get distracted. Number 6, they expect to fail over and over. They don't want to fail, and they don't like to fail, and they hate to fail, but they recognize that failure is an indispensable part of success. So they are willing to fail, and then what they do is they just learn everything they possibly can from that last mistake. I'm developing a program which came out of some work at Harvard, and it's based on the concept return on failure. Return on energy, return on income, return on equity. But I think there's a whole new market for a product called return on failure, where you can take any mistake that you make in business and sit it down, and like a machine in the kitchen, you can extract all of the lessons that you can learn from having made a mistake and get much more value out of a mistake than just learning and moving on. I think that's really important. I think you should try it as well. Whenever you make a mistake of any kind, stop the clock and say, well, what can we learn from this next time? What can we learn so that we don't make this mistake next time? And instead of passing it by like a brave soldier, really go into it and see what can we learn here that will help us in the future. All success is based on failure. All success is based on failing over and over and learning from that failure. So number 7, oops. Here we go. Number 7, they love to sell, and they love to promote, and they love to persuade. They love to talk about why you should use their product or service. They're absolutely convinced that their product or service is better than anything else. Again, from the Inc. study, they found that the heads of these companies love the product and love their customers. And they just want to talk about it. If you meet them socially or you meet them in business, they'll start talking about their product, and they'll talk about how it works and where it came from and who uses it and the difference it's made in people's lives. Number 7, they're incredibly persistent. This is another one. It's not on here, by the way, but they're also incredibly optimistic, which is the foundation of persistence, is they cannot even imagine quitting. It just never dawns on them that they could possibly quit, even when the companies are in serious trouble. Is for them, failure is not an option. This is really a major quality of successful managers, is they never think of quitting, only of trying something different. Now, this is a section which I would like to talk to you about, which may cause us to go over a couple of minutes, but this is life-changing. It's business-changing, is they generate great numbers. And so we find that continuous focus on your most important numbers changes and improves them. And that if you are not really cognizant, as Howard has talked about your numbers, your systems, and so on, is that you can kill your business because you don't even know what to look at or what not to look at or what significance they have. So I just want to give you a couple of thoughts here. We say that, the fact is that the potential profitability of your business is far greater than your current results. This is where you are now in terms of sales and profitability, and this is where you can be in the future. And the question is how, and the answer is by focusing on the key numbers of your business all the time. Always you're focusing on those numbers. And all business activities can be expressed in numbers. So we say numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. Key numbers measure success or failure. But there's many numbers that you can measure, and if you measure the wrong one, it can be fatal to your business. Number 3, accuracy is essential to business success. I have a good friend who came from Moscow to visit me a couple of weeks ago. His name is Alex, and Alex is really a smart businessman. I just love to listen to him. And I spent half a day with him once, and we were talking about business success. And he said these words, and I never forgot them. He said, inaccuracy in business is a business crime. That's what he said. Inaccurate numbers in business is a business crime. If you're working on the wrong numbers because you haven't got the right numbers, you are committing a crime against your business. And wow, and he runs a very complex business, and he makes an enormous amount of money. But he keeps repeating that. It's a business crime. And so therefore, getting accurate numbers is really, really important. So the most important number in your business is called the economic denominator. I've been teaching this in my coaching classes and to my business owners since 2001, but I find that they're now teaching it at all the universities. There's always one number that is more predictive of business success or failure than any other number, and it varies depending upon your business, the market situation, the competition, a whole lot of other factors. It's the one number that more accurately predicts business success or failure. And the question is, what is it for your business? What is the most important business? And I've seen this because almost always the answer is, well, it's sales. You know, high sales means business success, low sales means business failure. So it's just the sales. You just have to check on the sales. And I was doing a strategic planning exercise, and one of the people in the group, this is about a 3,000 person organization, was saying, well, it's the level of sales. Everybody knows that. And so somebody else in the group asked, what if you are spending too much in advertising, promotion, repairs, and so on, to make sales? If you're spending too much to make sales, then every time you make a sale, you lose money. So the more sales you make, the faster you go bankrupt, which is the case in many businesses. The more sales they make at their cost of advertising, promotion, returns, and so on, the faster they go broke. And everybody in the room, all the directors stopped and looked at him and turned away because he was kind of overwhelming people by how smart he was. And then they suddenly realized he was totally wrong. Is if they followed his idea, which is to supercharge the promotion of the business, the company would be broke within a year. So it's not always sales. It may be sales, but it's not always sales. So what we find is a whole series of numbers. These are the business numbers to watch. The first one, of course, is sales of all products and of all services. Other revenues of all kinds, licensing fees, rental fees, leasing fees, and so on. And number 4, cost of goods sold, all inclusive. And if you have proper accounting, you have a number for each of these every single month. And you track these numbers and see, are they going up, are they going down, going sideways? Number 4, expenses, every cost of doing business. Because any one cost of doing business, if it suddenly changes, it can show you that the ship is actually veering over, it's about to turn over.